Welcome to another episode of our personal empowerment audio program, Finding Yourself in Paradise. Hi, I'm Michael Benner.
And I'm Steve Snyder, and our program today is on courage. We're going to talk about how to take the right risks at the right time for the right reasons.
There's a lot here. Courage is a human value, an ethic, even a virtue. It speaks to our character, to our perception of who we are. I think we'd have to agree, Steve, that each and every individual has enormous potential to be courageous. What we'll be talking about today is how do we get a handle on that and actually express it, develop it like a muscle, that needs some practice to be able for us to use it.
Well, I think anytime we do something new or change something we're used to involves some kind of courageous behavior. I mean, facing a fear or doing something different, change is scary for people. So there is some kind of courage involved in facing any kind of fear. I think what we need to do, though, is feel the rewards that we get for facing that fear and give ourselves lots and lots of pats on the back when we do face those things that are difficult. And then I think we can build our ability to face even more difficult things. The real courage comes in not just jumping into things, not just going out and exploring things because you're in the mood to. The real courage comes in seeing the big picture and deciding what you can do that would benefit both you and everyone around you, that would benefit everybody concerned, that might involve the risk of failure, or the risk of embarrassment, or the risk of disappointment, or the risk of a whole lot of bad things could happen when you jump forward to do something good.
So the hero would be a woman or a man who would consider all of that, or most of that, and go ahead and do it anyway. Actually risk their life, or maybe risk fame and fortune, or risk their status or prestige. Or it's a little hard to generalize, but I'll tell you, the first thing that comes to my mind as we present this program on courage is the people we see on the news that are often members of a community that have somehow saved the day, right? Just ordinary citizens. The media loves this stuff. And, you ran into the burning building to save the children and the kitten too. Oh, you're such a hero. What were you thinking? And inevitably the person says, well, I wasn't thinking. I didn't make a decision. I just did it. But I'm sure there were people in the same situation who would turn and run, screaming, get out of here, everybody run. And they didn't think either. So we need to start with, what does that say about who we are, or our attitude about who we are, about what we're capable of doing, and whether we've even discovered our potential. We talk a lot about that in this series, that we have enormous potential, each and every one of us. You and I agree. What people do to discover that, to develop that, or, here's an example of cowardice, to turn away from their very potential so that they don't have to risk. These, I think, are the interesting points we can flesh out.
Yeah, in terms of unconscious courage, like does the person run into the burning building or run away from the burning building? I'm not sure what that says about people. We'll have to take a look at that in the show today. But what I am interested in, for sure, exploring is the people who consciously choose courageous acts, like the stay-at-home parent, who gave up the better lifestyle, who gave up the lots of stimulation and stuff to be able to be there with the kid, even though there's a lot of sacrifice involved. Or someone, for example, who believes so much in a cause, like a school teacher who believes in the cause of children, is willing to take, quote unquote, a lesser paying job or a lesser prestige job because they care about other people and they want to help other people. I think there's a lot of courage that says in firemen and firewomen and people who do jobs for the good of humankind. I think that exhibits a great deal of courage. So there's those of us who are geared, I guess, toward saving the person in distress or running away from that. Somehow, I think there's probably some early childhood training involved in that. But maturation is the process that causes us to choose to take risks that would benefit other human beings or choose to move away from those risks.
See, I'm not sure we would know in many situations which way we'd break.
For sure. If you haven't been there.
There's a great story about a great story, as great as it could be in this great tragedy, the sinking of the Titanic in the last century, the ship that could not sink, and on its maiden voyage it goes to the bottom. Many of the people on the Titanic did heroic things, gave up their seat in the lifeboat so that others could go first. There are stories of some people, they just stayed in bed. They knew there were not enough life preservers, not enough lifeboats. Maybe they were up there in years anyway, so they said, sweetheart, let's just, some great stories about a number of people that did that. And similarly, on the same boat at the same time, men who dressed up like women to get on the boats, because it was, women and children first. So, what does that say? And do you think the best psychologist or analyst could have told you ahead of time which way that person would break? I'm not sure. Even if we were really skilled at interpreting people, I think there are some unknown factors here that might surprise an expert and might even surprise the individual dressing up in women's clothing, saying, I'm so ashamed of myself, I can't believe I'm doing this, and yet compelled to do it anyway. This is, to me, part of what's fascinating about plumbing the depths of our character to see, am I coward? Am I courageous? Or like most people, am I somewhere in the middle? And where in the middle? And how do I find my place there? How do I better understand myself along this dynamic?
As a little boy, I remember hearing the story of John Kennedy when he was in the Navy, and he was the captain of a PT boat, and it was shot down. And
Profiles in Courage.
Yeah, Profiles in Courage. So he's in the ocean, fire everywhere, and there's this other guy that he knew, one of his crew, who was injured. And so instead of save yourself, he actually saved this other guy. He put a strap in his teeth, and he had the other guy grab on, and he swam.
John Kennedy did that?
Yeah.
Put a strap in his teeth and dragged.
Yeah. Wow. So, to me, would I do that? I could never say yes. I mean, I have to admit, I could never say that I could be that. I mean, in the ocean, I would save my life.
You could say it, but not with any certainty.
I would do my best to save my life. If I felt like I had a grab on to something that, then I'd go to try and save somebody else. But until I was safe, I don't think I'd have the kind of courage to do something like that. That's pretty remarkable. That always was.
But you
to me,
don't know, Stephen.
Yeah, you don't know.
That's my point.
I've saved people's lives a couple of times, in my life. Yeah, I mean, I gave mouth to mouth to one person and saved her life.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did. And I did a Heimlich on somebody and saved their life once. But that was I didn't think.
There you go.
I didn't think. Much more courageous, I think, for me, was telling my mom she's too old to drive a car. I mean, honestly, to sit down with my brother and say to her, look, it's dangerous now. I thought that took more courage than almost anything I'd done up until then.
It begs the question, what was at stake?
Yeah.
I mean, follow it through.
Yeah.
It's not your life that's at stake when you help somebody with CPR or when you give them the Heimlich maneuver, but you did go out of the way to learn those things.
Right.
You got trained. That wasn't an accident.
No, I learned both those things.
You'd gone out of your way to learn both of those things. So there's something to be said about that. You had sort of planned in advance to be of help if you could. But I guess there's an element here, some variable, some factor that we just can't identify, some unknown that could cause us to break one way or the other when our life is at stake or something that we value is at stake. What do you think was at stake in telling your mother that she's too old to drive?
Oh, a lifelong opinion she had of me as being a wonderful son.
You were risking your...
All of a sudden, I could be the bad guy, the evil, trying to take over her life. All of a sudden, in my mind, she's going to hate me now. And she always loved, I was always her favorite. She loved, my brother would admit it. She adored me. And all of a sudden, I'm risking that adoration. I'm risking, I mean, it wasn't a question of whether I was going to do it or not because she was getting dangerous on the road there, but it was hard. And I face hard things still with her. I mean, there are some challenges. Facing your mom takes some courage. Most people would say, or facing your parent, takes some courage if they're still around. See, that's where fear is born. That's where love is born, is your relationship with your parents. So I think those are almost always the most challenging ones for us to face. Or if they're passed on, the values they've left inside of us, the feeling the guilt or remorse or regret sometimes because we're not living up to the standards they set for us. I think we all go through some of that stuff. Courage, I think, is facing up to all those old voices. Courage is also taking a look at facing the future possible risks. But courage is always in the facing. And I think cowardice is always in the failing to face, in the ostriching, in the denial or avoidance kind of behaviors.
There are a number of quotable quotes. I don't have any of the attribution here at hand, but I can remember reading on several occasions different people saying essentially the same thing. Courage is not doing something without fear. It's feeling the fear and then going ahead and doing it anyway. It's accepting the risk as worthwhile. And what that speaks to is human value, I think, or virtue, or potential, is the fact that deep down inside, I think everybody recognizes that we're part of a human family. We can talk about love thy neighbor, but often that doesn't run very far up the block before they go from an us to a them. And yet, deep inside, the awareness that there really is no them, that whoever you meet in this world and wherever you happen to meet them, if you'd grown up next door, they'd be your friend. You'd know them well. If this person happened to be in your family, it was your cousin, you'd probably go out of your way to get along with them, to overlook particular faults and so on. You'd say, well, he's one of us rather than one of them. Deep inside, I think humans on some level are aware of this common thread or common link that is the family of man.
And with that, it takes less courage to say hello to a stranger, when it is all us, or let's say the only them are those renegades that distinctively prove themselves to be not us. You have to do something to become a not us. Everybody's an us unless you behave in an evil way. Then benefit of the doubt kind of us, then it takes no courage to say hello to a stranger, to spark up an acquaintance with somebody new, to treat people the way you wish to be treated until you determine how they wish to be treated and then treat them that way. We can do that with other people. It doesn't take a whole lot of courage once we feel safe, but the courage comes in feeling safe. So what we need to do is expand our usness, smaller and smaller themness, and then we don't even need to access our bravery. Then it just becomes easy to behave in brave ways. What takes courage is deciding to expand the usness to include what used to be the them.
I think we also should talk about the differences between an external behavior or an action that we take that's courageous and the willingness to know things about ourselves, okay? That I can see people who are willing to be very courageous in their behavior, maybe even to flirt with some kind of death wish, to drive too fast, to be the adventurer.
I'm not sure that's courage. I mean, it's certainly courage to climb a mountain to save somebody, but is it courage to climb a mountain because you're in the mood to climb a mountain?
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But it might be motivated by a desire to demonstrate to yourself or others that you are courageous, when in fact, when it comes to knowing yourself, to understanding your identity, your motives, why you feel the way you feel, what makes you tick, I think there are people that could create an appearance of being courageous in terms of a willingness to climb rocks without ropes or whatever, right? For themselves or to help others, matters not. When in fact they still lack the greater courage to face the questions about who they are. That would be my argument anyway.
Yeah, I think that people who behave in a borderline self-destructive way, that do life-threatening things, when there are much safer ways to get those same kind of thrills. I think those are courting danger. I don't think that's courageous. I think that's foolhardy. I think that's just not really appreciating who we are and how much there is to lose, by killing yourself. There's a difference here. And yet, those people who take on risks and say, this is a challenge, I've practiced, I've worked, I've learned, I've mastered the skills to take on this challenge, and I'm going to be the first one to climb this mountain, or I'm going to be the first one to swim this channel. Hey, that's amazing courage, But it's not a foolhardy just because it's dangerous. I'm going to do it. It's not driving real fast just because it's feel like driving fast. There's a big difference between foolhardy behavior, I think, and truly courageous behavior.
Would you do astronaut things? Would you be an astronaut?
Personally, I don't think there was ever a time in my life when I would have had the courage, quote unquote, to be an astronaut or to do anything that would involve physical danger as a job.
So if NASA came to you and said, Mr. Snyder, you've been chosen from a large, long list of candidates here to lead our mission to Mars, and you're going to be gone for, there'll be 5 years of training, and the mission itself is 4 years, so figure a decade of your life. First thing I guess you'd have to consider is the fact that you're married.
You're talking about now?
Yeah.
Oh, there wouldn't be a chance in hell I would do that.
Really?
I mean, never in my life would I have done that, but certainly never would I do that. Now, they would never ask me. I mean, I'm 50, moving on 58 years old, I had a heart attack. I mean, I'm not the ideal candidate to go to lead
putting all of that aside.
That aside, I'm not a great manager of people either. So leading a mission no, I wouldn't. I'm not I would never be interested in doing anything like that, nor would I be interested in test piloting airplanes or race cars or anything that risked life or limb. I've always been prudent, maybe cowardly. I don't know, but at least prudent in terms of not wanting to do dangerous things.
I don't think it's just not to be courageous doesn't make you a coward. It might make you a very reasonable, well-centered individual, who's got your wits about you. So I guess then the idea of asking you whether you would go if you knew it were one way is ridiculous. You would not consider that.
I wouldn't go if I knew it was two-way, and I wouldn't know it was two-way because some of those things end up being one. No, I wouldn't go. I just no.
We could find people that would go if they knew it was only a one-way trip. They'd still go.
Oh, there are people, and even in my 20s, I wouldn't have done that. But I did know people when I was in my 20s who were in their 20s who would jump at the chance to do that either way.
To give their life for the adventure and the excitement, I don't know, maybe the prestige or honor.
Well, I mean, I think most explorers did that. I mean, Lewis and Clark didn't know they were going to make it back. I mean, you go off on a trip like that, who knows? Daniel Boone asked once, have you ever been lost? He goes, no, but I was bewildered for a couple months there, It's like, that to me, you don't know you're coming back. That's courage.
He would talk like that.
Yeah, might bewildered. Would you do something like that? Would you be an astronaut? Would you take those kinds of courage just before you were married?
No, I don't think so. I'm not very adventurous in that way.
You used to backpack alone, and that was always sort of frowned upon.
I'll walk on a trail, but I'm not going to climb rocks.
Yeah.
I never had the upper body strength or the desire to do that. Again, I think this is where the individual comes in. I don't think we're all wired the same. To me, to be able to hit a double in a baseball game and drive in a run, especially if my girlfriend was sitting in the stands, that's like the penultimate. I mean, that's the gold medal for me, right? I was easily satisfied, happily pleased, and I didn't need these grand adventures. I never dreamed of great adventures.
I sort of went the other way. I think when I was 12 and my dad left, I pretended that everything was okay because I had to be strong for my mom. I was now the man of the house, so to speak, even though her brother was around too. But I remember pretending it didn't hurt, pretending I wasn't going through this agony of missing him, so I could be strong for her, and pretending to be courageous. But inside I was, crumbling, and I did semi-permanent damage. I mean, I hurt myself by not allowing myself to be a 12-year-old who'd lost his father and instead tried to be a grown-up taking care of the world now on my shoulders. So, yeah, we can we can do ourselves damage by being inauthentically courageous, trying to do things that we really can't do, that we aren't emotionally capable of handling. But I think real courage comes not in the big events of our lives, not in those moments when we have the opportunity to run into a burning building and save somebody, but in the day-to-day operations of our lives, choosing to be assertive or choosing to be avoidant, choosing to look at the risks and weigh the risks and take the right risks at the right time for the right reasons, or to avoid looking at the risks at all, or when looking upon them, choosing to not make any choices. You got to understand that there's always risk in making a choice and less risk in not making a choice, but making a choice, even the wrong choice, is always better than not making a choice, because even the wrong choice can lead you to the right choice. You can learn from your mistakes, whereas your wrong choice, you don't learn anything from that. From not making a choice, there's no value in the process.
This series is called Finding Yourself in Paradise. We talk about the idea that there is a true, authentic, genuine essence beyond the roles and characters that we tend to play when we want to please or influence other people. A higher self that we can access. And the primary way to know the difference between the true self and the roles we play is the difference between love and fear. And I think we can overlay that here as well. Real courage has to come from love, from facing fear, but caring more about the love and taking the risk because of that magical attraction or affinity that love represents. I talked about it earlier in terms of the family of man, but again, the willingness of people to give up their lives even for strangers makes it easier to understand how we'd be willing to do that for our kids or for our parents or our good friends or something. Wouldn't think twice about it. Whereas the absence of courage, which would tend then toward the cowardice or the unwillingness to even be assertive, to stand up for yourself, let yourself be walked on like a doormat, that obviously would have to be supported by fear. So I think that's another way to help flesh this out is, are we coming from love or from fear?
And that's really the way you can tell the difference between the two minds, because the higher consciousness doesn't have any fear except of those things that are truly dangerous, and it understands that those things that are truly dangerous will kick off a fight-or-flight response. So it's not something it's concerned about. It knows it's got a mechanism for handling that. So anytime there's any fear, now we're talking about the ego selves. So courage comes in the higher self stepping back, seeing the bigger picture, and realizing that it can face anything it's afraid of, using love as the lens that it sees it through. It can face anything it's afraid of with confidence and with clarity and with understanding. And as it takes a step to heal what has hurt or to fix a behavior that was no longer serving you, when we do that, face that thing we're afraid of through the lens of love, that's a courageous behavior. So from the higher self, virtually everything we do, whether we're looking back and healing our hearts or looking forward and solving our problems, it still involves a certain amount of courage.
Thinking of a couple of stories to illustrate this. One is a sort of an American Indian kind of a story. It's usually told that way about the medicine man or the American Indian chief, the wise elder, sitting with his grandson. And they're talking about life in general, and grandfather says at one point to the grandson, "You know, there are two wolves that live within me." The little boy says, "Really? Two wolves live inside you?" And grandfather says, "Yes. One is good. One is wonderful. It's loving and kind and generous. It protects the innocent and is very strong and powerful. And the other wolf, of course, is selfish and greedy and filled with fear and cares about no one or anything but itself. And they're constantly battling inside me, back and forth and back and forth." And you can imagine the way the story goes. The little boy says, "Well, which one wins, grandfather?" And after a pause, the grandfather says, "The one I feed." And that's where we are, I think, in this discussion. What wins, the courage or the cowardice, the love or the fear? Our belief in our potential, even those parts of us that are as yet undiscovered, to have faith in ourselves. Imagine the concept. To have faith in other people is one thing. To have faith that the universe is an ordered place is another thing. To have faith in yourself, that may sound a little convoluted or contradictory, but I think that's something that we need to take a look at. What would cause me to have faith in myself? And how do I build that to get the self-esteem and the self-confidence I need to move in the direction of courage anyway, by being a little more assertive than I've been, and then maybe not aggressive, but a little more assertive each time, standing up for myself or standing up for truth, speaking truth to power, regardless of the consequences, taking the side of justice rather than settling for injustice just because it's okay with everybody else. Those qualities have rewards that are associated with them.
So the first thing we have to do is identify why we are debilitated by the fear, why we don't automatically behave in courageous ways and take those risks. And I think it's pretty simple, because our autopilot is set on letting the ego do what our ancestors' egos always did, which is to keep us alive. So what we've done is anything that we're not sure of, anything that we don't know what to do, anything that confuses us, let's pretend it's dangerous and behave as if it's dangerous, and let's survive. It's not about growing. It's not about getting better. It's not about facing the hard stuff and improving. It's really about plain old ordinary survival. So when we move into that mode, when we take a look at this thing might be scary to do, and therefore it might be dangerous, therefore I might get hurt or die, let's not do it. That's a good thing when there's a lot of danger out there, but that's not the reality anymore. So the first thing we have to do is recognize that our DNA, in a way, is set on let's not take the risk because it might be dangerous. Now, very few of the risks that we have to take in our lives that we're really considering, that we're reasonably considering taking, are, in fact, life-threateningly dangerous. So that's not part of the equation most of our lives anymore. So what we must do, first of all, is make a conscious decision that I'm going to pursue thoughts that I have and ideas that I have forward to the next step, and not just not do them because they might be dangerous. I'm going to respond instead to those thoughts that my brain immediately put a halt to my process with, by tightening my muscles and holding my breath, by making me scared, by making me frightened. I'm going to consciously choose to take a step forward through those things by taking a deep breath, releasing my tension, anxiety, and confusion, and then taking a second thought.
You know what's cool about this is that throughout history, I would think as far back as the 9th or 10th century, when universities were first emerging in Europe, and then through the Renaissance, writers were talking about the virtues. Well, they would talk about the virtues and the vices as well, often churchmen and philosophers, as if these were characteristics that we were born with, that maybe were genetically encoded, and like the rest of your personality, that's just who you are. You were born with courage in your bones, or you're just a born coward. His dad was a coward, and his uncle, and they're just from a fit. What we now know in the last 100 years, really since about 1900, is that we can change that. We can develop all of that we are this potential, no matter how you look at it. Now, we have all this great research about the so-called plasticity of the brain, and that there are billions of these neurons, these cells in the brain, that are idling, and they're running, and they're just sitting there waiting in neutral for some direction, right? Well, what if the direction is, Mom and Dad keep saying I'm a bad little boy, I'm not very good, and they wish they never had kids, so the brain cells pick up that programming, right? I'm not very good in school, I don't read well out loud, I guess I'm stupid in a lot of areas. All right, neurons pick that up, life being a self-fulfilling prophecy to a large degree, reaping what you sow and all of that. And yet, in the same way, as we come to understand, these are not fixed virtues or vices, but potentials. And this is a continuum. And even if it appears that this is a weakness or a dysfunction or a vice in our lives, we can move toward improving it. That's, to me, the good news in all of this.
Yeah, and the first step is a simple one. It's either look at something you've been denying or avoiding, or look at something that you know you want to do and do it. It's really a simple step of being courageous and facing that which you've chosen to not face before, or doing that which you've been putting off doing. Here's a wonderful way to be courageous. You have a habit pattern. It's in there, and you have this thought of doing something good, and then you go, nah. Well, that's there. That happens before you even stop and think. That's just part of what happened before and before and before. But here's what you can do. You can add to that process a courageous step. So the next time you have this thought of doing something like starting that project that you've been meaning to start, or helping that person you've been meaning to help, and then you go, nah, say, hey, now I get a second chance. Now, here comes my courage energy. Now I get a second chance. Do I want to do that? My autopilot went and came up with the idea. That's the good little side of me. And then it went, nah, I don't want to do it. That's the bad little side. Now it's tied 1-1. Now I have a chance to win the game.
The tiebreaker.
The tiebreaker coming up here. Now I can have a second chance. Give yourself a second chance to be courageous. Give yourself a second chance to do the thing that you were going to do and then decided once again, like you always have, to not do.
So growth can come in baby steps. Again, it's not always this great leap of faith. You don't always have to risk your life like the one-way trip to Mars in order to develop a character, a personality, or maybe to divine, to find within, to realize, and then to self-initiate some growth around courage that you were born with, that you just haven't discovered yet. What if there is inordinate courage within you? And I don't mean reckless courage, but this power that you can pull on. You just haven't been telling yourself that story for whatever reason, because of the experiences of your life to date. The story you've been saying is, I could never do that, I can't do that, or I'm not willing to take the risk. What I hear Steve saying is, challenge yourself with a little baby step. Just take one little step in that direction. Sort of like wading into the pool. Stick your toe in it, take some baby steps, and cultivate courage. This is a very exciting concept. It's not a matter of either you have it or you don't have it. Either you are or you are not courageous. There's a certain amount of courage in looking for the courage and then developing it from your raw potential.
So understand, a little bit better is a lot better than not better, because a little bit better starts a process of getting more courageous and more courageous and more courageous, and remaining not courageous keeps you in the exact same place. Now, it's got to be a goal of growth, success, and fulfillment to become more and more courageous. Not more foolhardy, not more reckless, but rather more courageous, more willing to face the things we're afraid of, and more willing to take the steps toward those things that we dream of. That's what courage is all about. So to me, it comes with becoming more assertive, becoming more clear on what it is that we do want, what it is that we are afraid of, and to face the things that we're afraid of with the love that we have that comes from believing we have the ability to do what it is we do want. We have the power to solve our problems, to heal our hearts, by taking baby courageous steps. And again, it comes down to becoming conscious in any given moment. Can I do it differently than I was going to do it? Can I do it differently than my autopilot? Can I find a better right answer this time? Change is scary. It takes some courage to face it. But can I do it better than I did it last time is a really powerful and courageous way to live your life, full of continuous improvement.
It makes sense. The one thing that all life has in common is growth. You might call it learning or understanding or healing, or you could call it atonement, resurrection, a lot of different names for it. But everything in life is growing, unfolding, and getting better and better. There's a wind at your back. So I think the answer is yeah, and call your bluff by taking that little baby step. Again, moving from cowardice to courage, those are extreme terms. It's like the word fear. Even the word fear sounds so overwhelming that if you have a small fear, you discount it. You say, well, I'm not really afraid. I have my concern, but
I'm a little apprehensive.
Yeah, I'm nervous about it, but I'm not afraid. Hey, however much, it's still fear. it's still anxiety, nervousness, that they all come in varying degrees. So you decide how big a step you're going to take as you move from cowardice to courage, from apprehension to assertiveness. Let's say it a little more gently there. But my favorite has got to be moving from fear to love. And that's a natural order. That's, to me, in a philosophical sense, not a religious, but a philosophical sense, that's what redemption, salvation, and resurrection really is. Lifting something from chaos into order, from fear into love. Today we're just talking about it in different terms, from cowardly to enormous courage. And even then, every day in every way, better and better, fear to love.
And I think that's a wonderful place to go, from fear to love. I think that's the nature of our evolution, and I think it also can be the nature of our audio journey. So why don't we take people on a journey from fear to love, from cowardice to courage, from that place where we are avoiding or denying to this place where we are facing, understanding, accepting, and growing. So it all starts with becoming conscious and awake. And paradoxically, becoming awake begins as you close your eyes and take a really deep breath, conscious of the fact that the air flows into you, and hold at the peak, and then consciously feeling the air come out of you as your muscles release all the tension, and you feel peace, release apprehension, and you experience a wonderful sensation of happiness and even elation as you find yourself in this place, this paradise space inside your mind.
Your brain, your mind, your emotional intelligence, your physical performance as well, all works best when the emotional nature is calm and the mental nature quiet. It's a matter of convincing the brain and the mind that you're really safe enough to focus your attention, to concentrate on learning, on understanding, on initiating growth and improving every day in every way, growing by getting better and better. First, convince the brain you're safe enough to do this with the slow, deep breathing. And after a few of those, allowing your breath to find a natural rhythm or a cadence is very reassuring to the brain. It says, well, we're a bit stressed, but apparently there's no danger. And then secondly, you add an actual feeling of letting go of muscular tension, and the brain goes, well, we've been wound up pretty tight here, but I guess there's no danger. Look at the breathing, and now the muscles are relaxing. This person is sitting still. I guess we can change gears and focus our passion. Pay attention to the core idea of lifting confusion, ignorance, that which you do not understand or know, about an event or a circumstance or about you as an individual and your particular potential, lifting that into knowledge, understanding, and realization, lifting it from fear to love.
And think of courage as a virtue, one that you possess. That when the chips are down, when it matters the most, it always brings out your best. Imagine yourself feeling courageous, feeling the bravery come through. And you know inside, confidence and pride, you'll do what you need to do. So recognize that the cowardice, the fear and the denial, the avoidance that you had before, you put that all on trial, and you decided to win and begin anew with a more confident, more powerful, more courageous you. So whatever it is that you've been putting off and you've been thinking you ought to get to and do, that things that you know inside are the things that are right for you, well, imagine now that you have what it takes to take yourself forward, to learn from mistakes, to make them and learn from them and grow and create, taking yourself out of good into great. Now's the time to be courageous and go to a place that you were afraid of before. Now is the time to let yourself grow. Be courageous as you become even more.
Allow yourself to remember a time, maybe not that long ago, when you were disappointed in yourself because you wanted to stand up for yourself or for another person or for a particular principle, perhaps for truth and justice in the American way, and yet you held your tongue. You didn't do anything. You didn't say anything. And sometimes that's appropriate behavior, but you're remembering now a time where you regretted doing that. You wish you had spoke up, taken some action. And so, of all the times it may qualify, allow one particular instance to bubble up into your memory where you have just a little regret or resentment, where now that you think about it, you could have done that better. If only you'd had a little bit of confidence, just a modicum of self-esteem. If only you'd been a little less afraid, you now realize, of what other people think. I'd have you consider that what other people think about you has importance only because you don't understand yourself as well as you could. Let me turn that around and say it in a positive way. Does this make sense to you, that the more you understand yourself, the less it matters what other people might think of you in that situation or this circumstance? And so imagine this memory of not so long ago when you could have done better, been a little more assertive. You wish you had a little more self-confidence to pull on. And now, just by making it up, you see yourself, hear yourself, and feel yourself being a little more assertive and not being so invested in what other people think, because you've put yourself in charge of who you are and what you stand for. And the more you know about yourself, the less it matters what others think. And realize you can build upon that one step at a time, a little more assertive, a little more confident, and yet never arrogant or pompous, for as you approach the higher self that lives in these wonderful levels of paradise, safe and relaxed, the idea of the separative ego falls away and is replaced by a more harmonious, a more unitive self that really sees benefits for all concerned, sees a you and me outcome rather than you or me. And even that can be built upon, and you are the one that builds it. From fear to love, from cowardice to courage.
So have the courage to say, can I find a better way? Can I do it differently than I used to do it before? Can I face up to the fact that I'm okay on this track, but maybe I could be more? Have the courage to face the things you've been avoiding, the things that you've been in denial. It's easy to stay on that particular track, but it's not a very good style. Take a look at what you've been not looking at. That takes courage to see. the things that you've been avoiding, the things that you wish didn't have to be, but they are. And by facing them with courage in your mind, it's going to be wonderful each time you do, because I promise you, you'll find if you face them with the courage that you find in your heart, all those things that have been troubling you, you'll be able to take them apart, figure them out, and put them back in a brand new way, facing them with courage, and you'll start a brand new day.
In just a few moments, Steve and I will ask you to open your eyes wide awake and alert, back in the room, with a full memory and a profound understanding of what you're doing here. Bring with you, gently, even effortlessly, the feeling in your body of taking one of those baby steps, being a little more assertive, standing up for yourself, finding an inner strength that says right is right, truth is truth. Even if it's my truth, I can, by respecting that others will disagree, stand up for myself. To stand up for myself. And so feel how that feels, to stand for something, for truth, for fairness and justice, for freedom and liberty, for the dignity that we must grant every human being, regardless of their station in life, their circumstance or appearance. Stand for something and step forward from that stance, deeper into love, deeper and stronger into your commitment to all that is good and true and beautiful in this world, and bring those feelings with you as you remember the room around you.
And with one more slow and conscious deep breath, feeling the air filling your being and allowing yourself to release, become aware of your surroundings, and open your eyes and bring yourself back to wide awake from that very narrow awake place of the alpha brainwave state, that place we call paradise. This is back to the wide awake, a much higher level of alpha, or perhaps a low beta state. This is a place we spend a lot of our time, but know that with just a breath and closing your eyes and going back to paradise, you can go back to that alpha state anytime you want to in your life. It's really easy to do.
Yeah, and give yourself a pat on the back. The very fact that you listen to these programs, that you're a subscriber, that you want your friends and associates to know about the whole field of personal development and empowerment, says something about you as a courageous person, right? I'm thinking of that song, I think it's Queen, We're Not Gonna Take It.
Oh, that's the Who. We're not going to take it.
Oh,
Never
that's
did,
it.
Never will.
Yeah. A lot of folks are just willing to lay down and accept things the way they are. And again, courage is not limited to people who run into burning buildings and do these great heroic feats. It can just be honoring the longing you have within you to be a better person and make a contribution to the world being a better place. It's really that simple. That's courage. And how much or how little you do, you be the judge of that. You get to determine what you're capable of, but know that it's in there. Orient yourself to that polarity, always moving from confusion and fear to love and understanding, and you're going to feel better and better about yourself every day and in every way.
Yeah, remember, a little bit better is a whole lot better than not better, because the object in motion tends to stay in motion. You create the momentum. So do something a little courageous, just a little courageous, and it'll allow you to do something a little more courageous the next time. And always remember to come back to the website, focuspassion.com. There's all kinds of good stuff happening there, including the Send One to a Friend gadget and all the unpurchased podcasts, the topics you might have missed before you became a subscriber. So all just 99 cents. So come in and join our 99-cent store and see what you can find in there in store for you to solve your problems and heal your heart.
A week or two ago, I mentioned writing to us, sending us email, and we got some really interesting feedback, ideas for the program. Somebody said they really liked the new little musical theme we put under at the beginning, and we're always looking to improve, particularly by responding to what you think are some good ideas. So let us hear from you. Write to us at newsletter@focusedpassion.com. Remember, focused is an ED. Newsletter@focusedpassion.com. We'd love to hear from you, your comments, your questions. Be sure to use that send one to a friend gadget, and as always, be gentle, love life, and take care of each other. For Steve Snyder, this is Michael Benner. Aloha from Maui.